Hello and welcome to iteration number 2 of the color palette project. So in iteration number 1 we planned, and we finished iteration 1, the planning, and now we're working on iteration number 2. So we say iteration 2 project setup. And as we mentioned before, this is an essential iteration that will happen in all your project. The objective is to set up everything you need to move forward with your project. So what we do in the iteration, discipline yourself to strictly follow the app development process. So we'll say that the first step is problem formulation, second step is solution formulation, and the third step is solution implementation. In the solution formulation, in this particular iteration, we need to define the scope and we need to define the testing scenarios. You may do some research if you need to, so feel free to add that step. In the scope, I need to set up Xcode project. For the color palette. Notice that there is a naming requirement for if you're doing this for my class. So make sure you set up the project with the correct name. Now we need to set up the local and remote source repository. We're using our own UC GitHub installation for that. And then we also want to set up launch screen. If you are working for a project for a company, sometimes there are certain requirements for project configuration and so on, launch screen, and then maybe before we do the launch screen, we can say set up or configure the project. Launch screen, you may also use the app icon, versions, and so on and so forth. In the testing scenario, user launches the app and a launch screen is displayed, and then a blank main screen. And you can also put in the testing scenario that a source code repository is set up, and you may put another scenario if the versions, if the device iOS version and configuration are important, then test those as well. So let's say, for instance, you want to create a project that works for iOS 8 and up. So you want to test on a simulator, or set up a simulator for iOS 8, iOS 9, or iOS 10, and test on each one of them. If you want your app to work on both landscape and portrait configurations, then you want to set up some testing scenario to make sure that the app setup and configuration works on all the different scenarios that you are expecting. Then we move to the solution formulation, and the solution formulation also follows the same steps model, which is the data. So the data here could be launch screen text and launch screen text and image. It could be the app icon image as well. And this will be, we will represent them using the storyboard in Xcode. So we're not going to do any code using storyboard. So we're going to load them as files in the project, or a file, yeah, probably we just say it's a file. We need to add file to the project. Add file to the project. In the solution formulation as well, we have the I'm trying to move quickly. The view is the user interface, so we can use display image on the launch screen. So we will use UI image view for that. And then we need to display text on the launch screen. So we will use the UI label for that. And we've done this in module number 1, so this should be straightforward for you. You may also consider changing the background color. Change background color on the launch screen. And this will be the UI view background property or attribute. I use these two interchangeably. So that's the view, and then the third one is the controller. So use the default controller. So we're not going to do any custom controller, which is UI view controller. The view controller is responsible for displaying the image and allowing you to displaying the screens and closing out of it and so on. So in the solution implementation, step 1, create a single view template Xcode project and name it and select configure name and location. This is important. Then step number 2, set up local and remote source code repository. Then step number 3 is configure project version and anything else. Really, I'm not going to do much there. And set up the launch screen, and then finally test. So these are the steps we're going to follow in iteration 2. Now notice that we can actually go very quickly on some of these iterations, and I have seen a lot of people will tend to ignore that part and just do it in their head. Actually not ignoring it, you're doing it in your mind. And that is, for the purpose of my class, that's not okay. You have to follow these steps. But realistically, and in the class you have to follow because I want you to get in the habit and the discipline of doing it. But in real life, if it is simple, you can do it. You actually still gonna do app development process, but your iteration will be a lot more complex and sophisticated than that. So some of these steps that I'm making an iteration, maybe you will do it as a step. All of this can be just one step in an iteration if you become very comfortable and accustomed. So the iteration can expand or can compress in its sophistication to reflect your background and interest and so on. All right, so now we are ready. Let's go ahead and launch the project. So we open Xcode and we get the launch screen. And we want to create a new Xcode project. Some people ask me, when you set up the project on GitHub, how can you open it from another computer? You just check out an existing project and put the URL for your project, and Xcode will download a version and allow you to work on it, and then you can push it back to your repository. So create a new project. It comes to the project template, and we are following iOS, so it's in the iOS tab, and we're going to be using the single view application all the time. And then next, you configure the project information, so the product name will use the last name underscore and then the name of the project. Organization name, organization identifier are important if you are using the Apple developer account to push the application to the website, to the App Store, and they are not as important if you're doing it just for yourself. The language is Swift, device iPhone, uncheck all the other items, and then next. Choose a location where you save your project. So here is a folder on my computer that I will save the project, and there is source control, create Git repository on locally. Yes, we want to create Git repository locally. Notice always save on your local drive, not external or USB or network drive, and then copy at the end, and then create. So Xcode will create the project. Bring it to the window here. We'll create the project and open up the configuration view. So this is called the project configuration view, and you can always come to this page by clicking on the project name on the left in the project navigation. This is the configuration file for your project, and it represents the outside folder. So this is the information we entered. And then here is the theme, which will be important if you want to run on your device. If you run on your device, connect to the device and it will show up in the schemes. And for now, I'm just going to select the simulator I'm going to use. I'm going to use the regular, not the plus, but you can use whichever one you want. Of the configuration, the deployment, I want it to go in this the way it is now. It will only run on devices that have iOS 10.2. If you want to be able to run on earlier version, you can set it up from here. The main interface, what is the storyboard file that contains your opening screen, not the launch, the first screen in your project, the one that will drive all your other app. So we selected main, which refers to the main.storyboard file that comes with the template. The orientation of the device that you want the app to respond to. And then you have, if you have icons, you can click on this button and upload icons to your app. It actually switched to the assets, and there's an app icon asset. And you can see these are the sizes of the icon image, and maybe in future project we can spend time. There are websites that give you free icons. So notice there are different sets of sizes. Here it's 20 size, but you need a 2x, meaning a 40 and a 60. Here is 29, so you need the 58 and the 87. And 60 the same, 120, 180, and 80 and 120. So these will be the signs to show your app icon and the sizes that Xcode requires. Back to the configuration, the launch screen. So here is the launch screen, and you can say yes, I need a launch screen. If you don't want a launch screen, you can direct the launch screen to the main, and in this case you're basically skipping your launch screen. So that's the app configuration. And so we did the single view template. We set up the local but not the new. We set up the configuration, so we need to set up the remote and the launch screen. So to set up the remote repository, first we need to go to GitHub. So if you are at the University of Cincinnati, we have our own GitHub installation, github.uc.edu, and you can go there and log in with your UC information and be able to create a new repository. So click on new repository, and then we'll put the information. I put 17SS because I create this project every semester. So in your case, you don't need to do that. And then the name of the project. You can put description if you want. You can make it public. I keep my projects private. And make sure you do not initialize this repository. Why? Because we already initialized it locally on our machine. All what we need here is a container where we can push the project to. So create a repository, but do not initiate it. We are going to initiate it. This is the URL that we want. So copy that URL. And then we go back to Xcode and go to the source control menu, select your project, and yeah, our screen is not showing that, but you select the project and go to configure your project. And in the configure the project under the source control menu, you click remote and then add a remote configuration. and you can give it any name you want, and then put the address URL, and then say done. So now we configured that project. The last step is to set up our launch screen. So switch to the launch screen. I want to do three things: change the background, add an image, and add text representing the project. This is called the outlet, the outliner, document outliner. Close that to make some room. So here is the view. So this is my view controller, and the white area is called the view. See that? White area is called the view inside the view controller. To change the background property of that area, you go to the attribute inspector, the third from the right in the utility area, and click on the background, and you can click other to get the wheel, the color wheel, and choose a background that is suitable for you, and then close the color wheel. To add text, we need the UI label like we did before. So add a UI label, align it, resize to depending on the type of data that you're going to use, and then change the number of lines if you're going to put more text, and then you can type the data in the text area. So I'll say that color palette. If you press Option Enter, you can make a new line. Alt or Enter or Option Enter, you make a new line. So now my label has 2 lines, but I created 4 lines here, so I have space. I can put my copyright information and then add another line, and maybe I'll have some space, and say select color and paint. Maybe I'll put the date. And so that's 1, 2, 3, 4 lines. If you want to add more, make sure you add more lines here so the text is not wrapped, and then you can hit tab to go to another screen and to another attribute, and it reflects. You can change the color of your text, and that's not a nice color. Let's back to this. You can make it centered. You can change the font size and so on. Then I want to add an image. To add an image, I need a component from the object library here. So I can filter the library with the name of the component I want. I want an image. So here is my image view. So I add image view. Now the image view by itself does not have an image. It's like a container. It's similar to the view. It's a rectangle area, except the view is an empty rectangle area. The image view is a rectangle area that can hold an image. So to bring the image, I need to add it to my project. You can add the file to the project from your file folder. So I have in my Finder, I have an image that I downloaded, and you can drag the image to the project like this, or you can drag it to your assets. You have to create an asset and drag it to the asset. So if I add an image here or in the asset, make sure you check copy items if needed. This is essential so that a copy of the image moves into your project folder, and when you move your project folder or push it or anything, that image goes with it. So finish. So now I have an image. Xcode automatically recognizes when your project has an image, and if you click in the select again, select and click to the image attribute in the image view, you see your image. So add the image, and here is my image being displayed in the project. You can adjust the layout the way you want, and then that gives us, so we did set up the local repositories, the launch screen. So now the last step is to test. So here are my testing scenario: launch the app and see the launch screen, and the source code is in the repository. So I'll go back here and run. So it runs the app. Here is my simulator. You can see a status update here in Xcode. It says building the project, compiling 2 of 2 files. Compiling meaning that it evaluates its correctness with respect to the rules of iOS, link it to all the other files that are required for the iOS library, and then deploy it to the device, in this case a simulated device. You can see here our launch screen, and then it will go to the main screen, which will be empty or blank at this time. It takes few moments the first time and then switches to the main screen. So that's all for our project. And finally, for Xcode source control, you can commit your project and put a note in the commit. So we'll say complete the project setup and setup configuration and launch screen setup, and then commit. Push to remote, I'll say push to remote. I think it may ask me for my username and password. If it does, I'm not gonna enter them on the video, but if it doesn't, yeah, it asks me, so I'm not gonna push for now. So I'll just so it committed locally, didn't push. I'll enter it outside the video, and then in the next video we'll be able to push with ease. So that's it for iteration number 2. And for this, so iteration 2 is complete. We move on to creating a color using only a red component. Thank you.